Here's a 1-minute highlight reel of the video so that you can have a self-guarantee that you're not about to waste an hour plus of your life. Look on your company careers website. Do you have stupid sounding titles that it's not obvious what it is? You probably do, so get rid of them. The amygdala response, or your brain just saying no, it will be hard to accept some of the information I'm about ready to throw at you. What works best sometimes sounds like a stupid idea. If I can put it in a nutshell, that's what it is. Psychological barrier that much of the audience watching this is going to face, and it's going to be challenging. Most likely, your team, or perhaps even anybody in HR, has never had that thought before. It's extremely low-hanging fruit, and it's all based on the algorithm, describing what a GoPro would see. As you are working that job or walking through that department, it needs to create images in people's heads. So going back to employer job ads suck, how you can make your job ads kick your competition's butt out there on the interwebs. I joined an in-house place. I wanted everything in that red circle over there at all costs, It allowed me to throw more bullseyes, less friction in the job offer process. Hiring managers do not control or even see the flow of resumes at all in the least because they fully trust the talent acquisition team. But before you can get the trust, you have to be on the same page. But your talent acquisition team doesn't understand the equity limitations. You're never going to get to that point. So all of this builds onto each other for razor sharp efficiency. Recruiters are painfully expensive, and I'm going to show you how to stop paying them so much. A Harry Potter cloak. My first in-house experience, I saved a company over 7 figures. The purpose of my hire was that the plant was a little bit too reliant on outside recruitment firms, and thus my main duty was to come in and save the company money by doing things in-house. The plant had about 7,000 employees on site, of which 900 were salaried. So at any point in time, I didn't have 900 openings I handled by myself, but rather it got up to 32, 36 at the most, for example, so you can get an idea of the volume that I was working with single-handedly. It was a beast of a plant, over 4 million square feet. It was a fully integrated automotive OEM, which means rolls of steel was the beginning of the process of the material flow, and a finished car completely ready to be shipped off to the dealership was the end of the process. These are the reasons why I can make this video and show you how to save money, because I have done it single-handedly, and I started from scratch. So even though I'm going to walk through step by step what I did, I need to speak to the audience real quick because I don't know who you are and what angle of the business you come from. And depending on the angle, you might need to approach receiving the information that's getting ready to fly out of my mouth. You might need to approach it differently. So for business executives, it'll be a lot easier. The way I will speak throughout this video will be from a very production bottom line, like obsession with the bottom line. If you come from the HR side of things, there are going to be a lot of topics in here that are going to rub you the wrong way. And we're going to cover this on the second slide. So it depends on from where you are in the business, how you're going to try to prepare your mind for this. If you come from HR, a lot of the things that I'm getting ready to talk about, we've done it this way, and all of the HR boxes that are required to keep the government happy with audits and all that stuff, you likely have put in a lot of time and effort building systems and HRIS systems at your place of business. The way to be the absolute most competitive and to pay recruiters less will undo a lot of that work. And the amygdala response, or your brain just saying no, it will be hard to accept some of the information I'm about ready to throw at you. It's not a question of whether or not I know which process gives the best razor results. It's a question of whether or not a reactive response to this information will allow you to accept it or not. Now, if I can speak to the other side of the audience, perhaps an engineering manager or an operations manager, or heck, the owner of a business under $300 million in revenue. Even though this information will be easier for you to take in, I want to let you know that if you were to try to implement this at your place of business, you're going to run into some of the pitfalls I personally ran into because I joined an in-house place. I wanted everything in that red circle over there. At all costs, I was laser focused on just the absolute best possible results. However, what I was blissfully, ignorantly unaware of is all this stuff up here. I probably picked battles a little bit too gung-ho in a sense. I guess pun intended. It was a Japanese automotive manufacturer. I was a little too gung-ho, and I did not choose the timing of my battles or choose my battles super wisely because I simply did not have the in-house awareness of all the work people have put in here. But that's almost a catch-22. I'm not saying that HR makes things harder. I'm saying a lot of the things that the government mandates that creates HR boxes to make audits easier, to make sure you don't get sued, essentially. A lot of that stuff, you need to find some sort of balance between what I'm about to show you and all of your HRIS systems that make things easier for everybody from a reporting standpoint. And I'm going to give exact examples of near the end, maybe the 15th slide, I bring this scale back up and I summarize the exact examples that you will have to face. And it is a true dilemma because you can't be awesome at both of these things. You can't be awesome HRIS systems, boxes, and everything's perfect and popping out everything for the government audit-wise, and have the absolute most competitive recruiting strategy in your city or in your state. You can't have both at the same time. I don't think it's possible. So for those more engineering managers, operations executives, maybe even maintenance executives, this is the balance that you need to keep in mind during this presentation because there's no one right answer. But I'm telling you right now, the reason why you're paying recruiters is because this green box is heavier and is down here. It's weighted heavier at your place. And that's primarily why you're paying recruiters so much. Let me show you a quick example, particularly for the crowd that might come from the HR side. I want to, lubricate the brain a little bit with an example of razor sharp what works, but I mean, like this is not how we do things, right? So I'm going to show you an example right away, a more fun example. And it's an example of a process that sounds stupid, but it is by far the best way to do it. And that type of mentality is very hard to understand when you don't have the urgency of production in your face all of the time. It's very difficult to understand. So here's the example. If somebody from a recruiting or staffing standpoint, probably a candidate who might have an offer out or needs to reschedule a second on-site interview for a final interview and hasn't gotten back with you, and you've done an email, maybe a follow-up email, and you're to the point of being irritated, right? Text isn't working, all that kind of stuff. There is one message that statistically will work better than anything else once you get to that phase, assuming that person owes you an answer, right? And all you do is send an email with 4 question marks on one row, copy it, paste it, 4, make a block of 16, or maybe 3, 3, and 3, a square of question marks, and send it. That's it. Nothing else in the email. I have never had one person ever in 10 years not reply to that, assuming I've tried to follow up normally and they owed me an answer. It's 100% hit rate. Here's where the breakdown is. Let me explain what's going to happen from an information receiving friction standpoint moving forward. That concept is you're going to say, oh, that's a horrible way, right? Even though my example was fun, but we're never going to say that's unprofessional. We're never going to do that. I understand, but do you want a perfect hit rate or not? That is the balance that you're going to be faced with. And a lot of the stuff I'm going to say, it won't sound like the right way. And so this is what's going to happen during this presentation. It won't be so drastic towards that example, like just a bunch of question marks. This is the psychological barrier that much of the audience watching this is going to face, and it's going to be challenging. What works actually best sometimes sounds like a stupid idea. If I can put it in a nutshell, that's what it is. Are you ready? All right, let's go get it. Where I started when I walked in was I had to create the sourcing strategy. I walked in and identified that there was a LinkedIn enterprise package. It was way too expensive. At that time, I had had about 6 years being able to gauge the effectiveness of LinkedIn ads and the enterprise package versus simply Career Builder, Indeed, and ZipRecruiter job board ads. And when you're watching this in 2028, the job boards might have different names, but those were the big 3 when I was doing this. Big 4. By that time I was here, Monster had kind of fallen off of things. And in the future, something might knock off Indeed from the top spot. So you can swap out the names of these job boards if you want. At the time, I came in knowing that LinkedIn did not have the best bang for the buck compared to ZipRecruiter and Indeed. For manufacturing, that does not align with all industries. It's possible in the health industry, LinkedIn works the best, but in manufacturing, it didn't. So I scrapped that and I got a simple recruiter seat that was a lot cheaper. It was about 1/50th of the price. And then I got a ZipRecruiter package of 25 slots where it's not a 30-day thing. You can post something and take it down the next day and post something else the next day and take it down in 2 days, and just it's that slot no matter what. And you're not penalized for ending an ad within 30 days. As opposed to the Indeed typical packages at that time, Indeed changes their package structure a lot. Right? So by the time you're watching this, it might be different from when it was when I came in, but I analyzed the sourcing. How did the company get resumes? Like, what was happening? I chose what was the best bang for the buck because I came in trying to save the company money. So I chose to go very bare bones for such a large place of business, and it worked fabulously. Like, you do not have to spend a ton of money. So I'm trying to show you how to save money right off the bat, is tracking how much money is spent per hire for each source. And I had used LinkedIn fairly heavily for over 5 years at an agency with which I was employed for about 10 years, but we used it more heavily for 5 years, and we had measured in manufacturing the cost per hire, or the rate of return essentially, and it was by far the worst at that time. And again, it might not be for industries outside of manufacturing. So I got the best bang for the buck packages. I analyzed that I would probably only have 30 openings at a time. So I got the 20 to 20, I think it was 25 slots, close enough. The next one was 50, too big, right? And more expensive. So I knew that, hey, if I have 30 openings, it's okay to have 5 not on there. And then I checked out the internal careers page and noticed that a couple of the buttons leading towards it could have been bigger or a different color or more attracting, almost like a hummingbird coming up to the bird feeder, the idea of red and being a loud color. So one of the departments that essentially sat within HR, they did this for me very quickly. I can't remember the ins and outs, but I looked at all the landing pages and I acted as if I were somebody interested in joining the company. And I thought, man, this would be so much easier if we could just make this small change. And honestly, the group that handled that, they did it very fast for me. So I would assume with your place of business, if it's not extremely obvious and loud, that might be an easy fix for you, and it's quote unquote free traffic with a simple fix. Now, the one-click applications will slide into that next, but the reason I put it down here is because this is going to be the first example of that balance from the last this. It's going to be the first example. It's going to cause a lot of pain for the HRIS systems. I guess it's in 2 more slides. But anyway, I made sure that on my ZipRecruiter, right, it was a one-click apply type of deal. And at that time, I did not integrate it within the ERP because it took a couple months to work with ZipRecruiter to get it so that it could correctly push the applicants through our own system. And then the original solution did not allow for quick applies. And that took even longer from a business perspective, and it will probably take a while at your place of business too, in order to find that perfect middle ground of how long does it take to apply. You want it as close to one click as possible. But if you do that, you're not going to have anybody's information in your business systems, whatever acronym that you want to place on it, MRP, ERP, HRIS system, or whatever talent acquisition jargon you want to use. And so what I did at the beginning was, going back to this, that red box, I went for all one-click applies. And later on, it caused a little headache for the HR department. And they had to slow stuff down and say, this isn't working, because I would get farther along in the interview process and I had not developed the knowledge to make sure they had applied, because I was all agency recruiter. So that was one pitfall I landed into, and that was the dynamic that we had to figure out. And in the end, we came up with a pretty happy middle ground solution. If you're going to try to stop paying recruiters so much, this is one of the first obstacles you're going to face. And that is the red box. This is the absolute most competitive way. One-click applications forever. And so what I came up with was I would have people apply after I screened them and I deemed them worthy of an interview. Then I created a mental process or a personal recruiting process to then have them apply. But then again, I wasn't getting potentially good applicants for other jobs nested within that business system for future searching. Because it's good to be able to collect resumes in general, right? As to be able to collect resumes to then search later. And we were sacrificing that ability in order to quickly hit the ground running with getting foot traffic immediately for the most immediate openings, at the cost of business systems not getting the information in it, and at the cost of not building the resume database until a few months passed, when a happy middle ground solution was made with ZipRecruiter to connect to the system I think was called iCIMS at that time. Within my first 2 weeks, the next big step that I took was I started trying to understand not just the department managers as people, but their entire department. It was very tricky for me as the salary talent acquisition person to understand each department, not just how they work together, but each department in general. And although it was a challenge because automotive is a beast, there's a lot to know. I can also attribute perhaps the vast majority of my success at that place of business because of my direct access to those hiring managers and the ability to understand their needs, their department, and maybe even make suggestions on what type of talent they needed to fill a certain role because of my then developed understanding of their department. So the next little bullet point down, understand intra and interdepartmental structure. The intra was actually a little harder to understand than the interdepartmental structure because the material flow makes the interdepartmental structure a little bit more obvious. When you send something down the line to another department and then there's a quality issue, you always have a little bit of this going on, right? So I understood that to a decent degree, but it was a challenge for me, which if you have a talent acquisition person going to handle this will be a major challenge for that person unless they've already worked at your place of business for quite a while. An example of my biggest difficulty in understanding is in the engineering departments. Each department was structured in almost like parallel teams. One for new projects or new equipment or new processes, and one for existing machinery and existing processes and minor changes to existing processes. Even though it was likely described to me the correct way by multiple engineering managers, it did take me a while to understand that. And that was an example of a small hangup that I had that when I finally overcame it and understood it, I was able to find talent faster for these hiring managers. The project management skill set or requirement needed for that was totally different for each side of each engineering department. So I kept providing candidates for the new equipment and new process side of things without a strong project management background who could clearly create a scope of work and leave the engineering managers with the idea that I know that person will perfectly keep me aware of their timeline and if they have any hiccups in their timeline. And when I first started sourcing, I didn't know that and I did not qualify for that. And I spend a little bit of tires because of it. But once I learned it, I was able to essentially get one interview to one hire a lot. And you'll see that near the end. I think in 1 month, I got 14 accepted offers. 7 of 14 were from one interview for the entire opening. Just one interview and one hire. Didn't even have to interview a second person because I understood the intra and interdepartmental functionings of the place of business for which I was in-house recruiting. The next step within there, though, from a more personal standpoint, so hiring managers are not robots. They are people. They have biases. They have, I guess, styles, management styles. Therefore, the style of employee under him or her that they know they get along with, or they know they can manage better, or just deal with, they have that fairly established, right? And so I had to smell that out for each individual hiring manager. And typically that style had to do with also their team. How dynamic was their team in personality, or emotions and all that kind of stuff, or how tightly knit were they? Or were they spread out throughout the plant? Therefore, a specific personality style within the candidates I provide would not be necessary for that. But other departments, it was highly necessary. Therefore, I had to go for not just towards a skill set, but towards a personality set, like the soft skills. I had to be very aware of the soft skills and basic personality styles as I qualified people for different hiring managers. And right behind me, I'm going to give you a quick example of how in-depth jobs need to be understood by your talent acquisition team. I had never recruited for IT ever before. I was a manufacturing recruiter. The only thing related to IT that I had ever done were what you might call CAD administrators, where they helped migrate system information over to a new and improved form or an updated version of Pro-E to CATIA or whatever the case. So I didn't know a thing about IT. However, among the departments that I was able to serve the absolute best was the IT department, perhaps because the hiring managers there were able to effectively communicate in a way that I was able to understand their job needs. They were highly proficient at it, and I killed it. And it was mostly because of their ability to communicate with me and my ability to ask questions, but we just jived from a communication standpoint. But that's not always the case. if you're going to stop paying recruiters, you have to know from a business perspective, or if you're an HR manager watching this, whoever you have handling this, usually hiring managers suck. Like, they totally suck at making job descriptions and making somebody who doesn't work that day in and day out understand. Like, they're not good at it because it's not their job. Like, it's not their job to be good at that. So they're usually not, right? Therefore, it's imperative that if you're going to stop paying recruiters, your TA team has to overcome that barrier. And it's through asking very in-depth questions. I'm not going to go over how to take a job order, which is from my agency jargon, but how to understand the job so you can throw bullseyes to the hiring manager. But rather, I'm going to give you an example of the point to which you want to be. But I'm not going to take the time to tell you how to get your talent acquisition team to get there. So knowing nothing about IT, but having awesome hiring management team with great communication skills, I actually tricked one of the IT managers, and it led to a very quick hire. And he was happy. He had a great attitude about it. And he didn't have to take it that way, but he did a great job. And I'll never forget this moment. But it's a perfect example of how well you have to understand these jobs. He needed somebody to be able to do 4 things. This was more entry-level IT for big business, a mixture between, he didn't need somebody to physically hook up hardware of the computers. Rather, it would be 1 or 2 steps above there. And he needed 4 main skill sets. But similar to how most hiring managers suck at describing their job to somebody who's never worked that type of field before, many candidates who have good work history also suck at writing resumes and guessing what are the main skill sets that I have that I need to make most visible on my resume. So many good hiring managers, again, suck at describing jobs, and many very good candidates who don't switch jobs a lot suck at writing resumes. Some of the best resumes you'll see are from people who make job changes a lot. And so that is an obstacle that your team will have to overcome as well. But here's the example. I screened this person because he had the right type of title. He had the target title, but nothing on his resume really screamed at me he could do those 4 things. And during the conversation, he said, "Oh yeah, I can do this." And he gave a description. I said, "Okay, well, it's not on your resume. I need to write this down. So tell me about it." And I typed as he spoke. Okay, the second one, "Can you do this?" He goes, "Oh yeah, I do that all the time." "Okay, tell me about it. I need to write this down because it's not on your resume." And I didn't write it on his resume. I wrote up a little report. Third, not on the resume? "Oh yeah, I do that all the time." Fourth, not on the resume? "Oh, I do that all the time." So I wrote a description of what he could do. And so I took the resume to the hiring manager and said, "All right, I took the resume to the hiring manager and said, 'Hey, I just talked to this guy. I don't know if you want me to bring him in or not.'" And he looked at the resume and goes, "Nope, not what I'm looking for," because nothing was on there. And I already knew he was going to say that because nothing was on the resume. And I didn't want to rewrite the guy's resume for him, right? So then I printed out what I had typed and said, "Well, what about if somebody could do this?" And so it was broken up into 4 sections, labeled clearly, the top thing he needed, the second one, and he read what that guy said, essentially, because I was typing as he spoke, and he goes, "Yes, I would hire this person." And I told him, "Well, he's just not good at writing resumes. It's the same person." He goes, "Yes, bring him in." And I think what happened was I ended up making that individual an offer the same day after he left. Because I was able to understand the exact needs of the hiring manager, I was able to get what I call a one and done. 1 interview, 1 hire. Coming from 0 IT recruiting experience. However, I had the blessing of working with managers who helped me understand it. I cannot stress enough how important this step is for your talent acquisition team if you're going to stop paying recruiters. The next area that I had to really focus before I was full throttle was I had to understand internal equity. And this is yet another pitfall of any talent acquisition person who has not had agency recruiter experience. Because an agency recruiter knows that if I don't get people hired, I don't eat. Therefore, I'm going to only send people who fit within the budget, as opposed to sending whoever's got the great skills and great personality who's close, maybe $15,000 over, but we're gonna let the hiring managers talk to them. Maybe we can work them down because they love the place so much, right? That's a big pitfall. And because it was such a large business, each department had its own internal equity schematics or dynamics that was native to that department. However, there were many constant denominators. And I needed to understand this in order to know how to not waste the hiring manager's time and my time, thus leaving other positions open for longer because I'm getting people who are simply way too expensive for the job. So within this process, I needed to understand essentially who controls the purse, how much wiggle room with salary do I have, how much autonomy can I have within there, and I had to establish that with HR management. And they were very gracious about that, which greatly increased my ability to go at light speed and make very solid hires like crazy. Understanding the internal equity of each department allowed me to essentially have lubrication with my candidates. It allowed me to throw more bullseyes, less friction in the job offer process. And because corporate America usually treats talent acquisition as entry level for the most part, these ideas might be overwhelming. Depending on the level of access your talent acquisition team has to whoever controls the purse, if there's a great distance, this will remain a great struggle until it's figured out. And then if you get new people into talent acquisition, those new people have to learn all this all over again in order to throw more bullseyes more quickly to the hiring managers. The next big thing I had to deal with was job descriptions. This was a big one. Here is another catch-22, or going back from the balance, the red and green. This is another one here. I had to completely revamp the way that hiring managers saw their jobs posted on the internet, and it caused a little bit of problems at first until the norm was reestablished. And I want to let you know, this is exceptionally low-hanging fruit. With this section of job descriptions, if you just do this only, and only what I'm about to show you in this small section, I think there are maybe 3 to 4 slides for job descriptions, you could potentially cut the amount of recruiter fee budget that you need in half. I'm not joking. This is such low-hanging fruit. This is a lot of bang for your buck right here. But then again, you have that balance thing happening, right? We've always done it this way. This is what's easier for us. So the one-click apply plus all the stuff I'm getting ready to talk about, I mean, it's the lowest hanging fruit that there is. But it causes problems because you're going to go in with that red weight and everybody is used to the green one. So a lot of the job descriptions were riddled with all the government required stuff. Equal opportunity, can lift 50 pounds, all that kind of stuff. Instead of describing the department, instead of describing the company and why somebody would want to work there. And so I reduced all those items, all the government/HR box items down to the bottom, and I made them a lot less visible, smaller print, all that stuff, and they just came in dead last. Very, very easy fix. And then also what caused a little bit of struggle was putting money right on it. However, the HR team that I worked with, even though we all knew that it was going to cause problems, we all made it happen, and it helped drastically. So if your company does not put right on there the pay range in salary, and then perhaps mention potential bonuses, sometimes it might be best to get rid of bonus information so that it's never perceived as something promised or a sign-on bonus or something. However, the salary range clearly visible almost right at the top. And then the next super low-hanging fruit that you can probably do immediately at your company to stop paying recruiters so much is look on your company careers website. Do you have stupid sounding titles that it's not obvious what it is? You probably do. So get rid of them and change the title. It doesn't matter if your business processes, so go back to the green versus red block. This is one where you pretty much have to go red. Like, this is a no-brainer and it can be done. It might cause problems because in your HRIS systems, it's labeled as, engineer 2 or engineer 3, but really that is a process engineer as opposed to a manufacturing plant engineer. A little bit different. You can't title it that way if you're going to get the right applicants, or if you have the title unit manager. Okay, your business title can be that for your HRIS systems, but you need that second field that it gives a different title for what is produced out there for other people's eyeballs outside of your HRIS system. And for example, unit manager, it needs to be something like production manager or stamping department manager, not unit manager. Like, no one's searching for that. Or you could just put stamping manager if you're stamping, or injection molding manager. Don't allow your internal jargon to be what is trying to attract people's eyeballs, because you are going to continue paying recruiters more money on average if you don't make that simple change. And that was a super easy fix. And that creates more traffic from your website And I've also seen companies put their internal jargon titles on Indeed and ZipRecruiter ads that they're paying extra money for, and they're getting way less bang for their buck. So make sure you're not making that mistake. It's just so easy to fix that part. All right, the second idea within job description, the last box on the bottom right is government mandates and incentive to go to the portal. HR folks and hiring managers, I know you spend a lot of time making sure that your job descriptions have everything on it that they need. Therefore, similar to the green versus red, a lot of time in the green, I'm getting ready to tell you something that is going to take away a lot of the work you've put in. And it's going to hurt, but you got to just don't let your amygdala response ignore what I'm about to say. Even though you might roll your eyes and try to scoff at it, I totally understand. If I were in your boat, I am the type of person who would want to roll my eyes and scoff at what I'm about to say too. I'm trying to show you how to pay recruiters less money, and there are some strange concepts in here. So the first one is, even though you probably think that your job descriptions are awesome, I'm telling you right now, they probably suck. From the perspective of somebody who wants to apply. They have to create a login and an ID and a password, right? Like your HRIS system's making it harder and a barrier to entry to begin with. But then your ads are what you all want. Your job ads aren't describing what the people want. Your wish list of at least 7 years of experience doing this, that is not what somebody wants. You don't need that type of stuff to be the basis of your job descriptions. So what I did was I created a one way to make the job descriptions so they all looked very similar, whether somebody was applying for a salaried role in operations or in IT. The job ads from a distance, let's say you hold the job ad printed out a little far away from your face and so you can barely just not read it, they all looked almost identical. So the title was at the top, and then just under there I had pay and location. So people knew exactly what city and zip code it was in that they were applying for. So they can map it out and discover, oh wait, I'm 90 minutes away, that's probably too far, saved a lot of time. So they don't have to go onto the website or go onto Google Maps and all that kind of stuff. I made it easy, the less barrier to entry, right at the top before the description of anything. So they know what they're getting into, so they know, okay, I can continue. This is my target title. I know it's a manufacturing plant because I roughly know what the company does. I know where it's located, all that good stuff. Okay, keep reading. Boom. Then I formulated a paragraph talking about the company from a material flow standpoint. I rewrote it to say it is a fully integrated automotive manufacturing company, meaning it starts with a roll of steel and ends with a finished car that's driven off. Fully integrated, so that people know in the automotive industry specifically that you're not going to a plant that only makes the engines and transmissions and then ships them out to, for example, GM up to Fort Wayne or Detroit for the assembly process. So I made it very distinct what type of automotive plant it was. There aren't a ton of fully integrated automotive plants in America. From a percentage basis, the vast majority are not fully integrated. So I described it to that level of detail so that at least automotive geeks knew exactly what they were applying to. And many companies have several plants. So if that is your case, you would probably need to mix that paragraph or create a second shorter paragraph for the plant itself. Our company is a family of companies, this and that, under the umbrella of whatever. We have 35 plants spread across the United States, so on and so forth. This plant has 250 employees, 20 of which are salaried, and you would need to describe the plant after the company. The next one just above my Super Saiyan hair over here is, I got more specific, still not talking about the job. Haven't even mentioned the job. Now I mentioned the context or more immediately around the job. So you see over here, this is context. This is the greater context around the job. Then up above my head is the more immediate context around the job. So that over here, the next little box is the job description, but now it makes more sense what the job is because you've given the greater context and the immediate context and then the job. So I described what the department was, if it had 2 parallel teams, which many of them did, particularly in engineering and quality, and then the number of employees in that department so somebody could get the understanding of, am I just going to be working with like 2 people around me or 50, right? They need to know these things. And then the next area is I described the job because I spent time with the hiring managers describing it to me. Probably spent 45 minutes each job at the beginning until I understood each department. Then they could just tell me, find me this, find me that, find me this, right? I didn't need to write it down anymore. But when I first started out walking in, right? So this is my experience when I was first starting. You don't want the job description to have a bunch of bullet points. Can do this, can lift 50 pounds, can manage a group, can do this. No, stop it. Stop doing that. Describe the job. Just write about it as if you were a writer. And so what you're going for when you write it is you want to imagine that it is essentially the words describing what a GoPro would see as you are working that job or walking through that department. It needs to create images in people's heads. So going back to employer job ads suck, look at how your job ads are written. I bet that you don't get the GoPro mentality from the part that describes the job. And if they do, then good for you. I have seen a small uptick in the amount of employers gearing their job descriptions towards the candidate perspective. Some are doing it. Some go a little overboard, like we are right in the mountains next to the river and it's great for fishing. Like, that's a little too far. Like, I don't think you need all that. However, the vast majority of employer ads, they're written as your wish list. As if the candidates owe you something and they need to apply to your wish list. That's not what's going to create traffic. Yeah, that's not what's going to create good traffic. Sometimes it's nice to have a few bullet points under the paragraph form, or in prose, the paragraph form description, simply to clarify things, to make people aware, hey, if you don't understand these 5 bullet points, probably don't apply. That is the main strategy I used for any bullet points that I needed to put within the job description, so it popped out to people. I didn't say don't apply if, but it gives them the hint. But anything in that up to 5 bullet points within the job description part of the job ad, those bullet points were already described in paragraph form with a GoPro mentality, creating visualization in that person's head. It was simply a reiteration of what was already written. Then the qualifications, again, typically are already described in the paragraph form from this box over here, the job description written paragraph form. Any type of qualification that you have, you can reiterate it with bullet points. So this is the only bullet point section that could be fully bullet points. But somebody reading those bullet points needs to be able to look up the paragraph above and say, oh, that's kind of baked in to what was described in a visual sense, and you're simply reiterating what was written in a descriptive format. Again, this helps you get away from your wish list. Rather, it helps people realize, hey, I've done that job, and they can't do it with your bullet point wish list. They can't do it. So an example of the qualifications being already baked into it is this person, let's take engineering for example, or the paragraph form job specific section might include a few sentences related to you will manage projects specific to new equipment which requires previous experience managing projects of $1 million in budget or higher. Something like that. And then as a qualification, bullet point, has managed projects of $1 million in value plus, for example. But even more specifically, within that, in that paragraph form job specific area, you would want to put something including writing the initial scope of work. Because if you manage projects, many projects are handed off halfway through. And so that many people say, oh, I manage projects, but really you weren't involved at the beginning. Most of the initial legwork with procuring the equipment, planning the floor, layout, all that stuff was done. And then as the equipment came and was already signed off, you were handling the installation of it, but you did not write the scope of work. For example, from beginning to end, there was a handoff to you, or you handed it off halfway through, something to that effect, even if you did do the scope of work, but you didn't manage the whole project. So the job description would need to get very detailed in that fashion so somebody could visualize, ooh, this is the whole project from beginning to end, as opposed to what I have done is I got it handed off to me in the middle. And most engineers would know that, where their job came into the routine project at work. And that will help the interview process because the candidate will be able to tell your talent acquisition team and or the hiring managers during a phone interview or an on-site interview, hey, this says it's from cradle to grave. I typically got the handoff after this point. and they could then describe where they're weaker, but then describe their strengths. And then the hiring manager then would better identify, hey, I'm really good at getting engineers new to my team up the learning curve to how to write the scope of work the way I like it. But a lot of the managers, they didn't want that. They wanted somebody who, at least within that plant and most engineering, they really focused on the ability to write that scope of work. And so that would allow me as the recruiter, because I understood the job so well, to be able to not only refer to the job description section of that, but also to be able to save the hiring manager's time because I understood their style, right? What works, remember one of those bullet points? I understood intra and inter, but also the hiring manager's style. I knew their style, therefore I never even sent those resumes, even though they might have been great for another department, but then I would simply push them over to another bucket or consider them for another engineering role that did not require that specific skill set. And that even that one little thing, that one idea saved me a lot of time and saved a bunch of hiring managers' time. And hiring managers, like that cost a lot of money, right? If you're wasting hiring managers' time, that's a lot of business money. And so your talent acquisition team can save you money like crazy just from some little, just what you might think is a minute little detail that saves thousands of dollars perhaps in like every month. Because if you're interviewing the wrong person, the more you're going to have to lean on outside help and then potentially have to pay outside recruiters the longer the job's open. And then, like I said earlier, all the government mandate stuff, all the can lift 50 pounds, all that kind of stuff at the very end, when people are essentially done reading because they can identify, does this job describe me or not? The next job description one. So even with that information, so I guess I kind of spoiled this slide a little bit because I've already talked about this, but my plan was to give you the previous slide and then tell you why your job descriptions suck, but then go to this side and say, well, if you change all that, they're still going to suck because of this. So the main idea is it's not your wish list. It's the GoPro idea. I wanted to save that for the slide, but I just spoiled it. Now, this third idea down, HR is often too focused on number of years of experience. So here's a specific example of red bubble versus green bubble. Many times you'll have talent acquisition people, qualified people say, well, do you only have 4.5 years experience doing this? And it could be the best candidate that your hiring team will find. But nope, we said 7 years, I'm not sending that person off. So instead of getting, and I've seen a lot of companies, so the company I worked for in-house was not caught up on that, thank goodness, at all. But referring to the hundreds of manufacturing clients for whom I've recruited over about an 11-year period, I would say close to half of them are completely stuck on this, often because the funnel of candidates goes through an, I wouldn't say entry level, but an HR individual who then says, I'm not sending that person off to hiring manager. We need 7 years. Without understanding fully from this resume, do I understand what that hiring manager needs done? And has this candidate done it? Have you done it before? And for more than 1.5 years or whatever. Sometimes people who have 20 years of experience doing something, they might suck at it, or they've lost the luster of working their butt off because they just have been doing it for so long. So yes, that 20 years of experience is more than 7, but if you're running into equity issues per, that third slide or whatever, and if those job descriptions are written 7 years minimum, but your equity doesn't allow for that, so you're almost never going to find somebody with exactly 7 or 8, right? On the cusp. Therefore, they demand not so high of a pay rate. So most people with a 7-year minimum are going to have 10 to 30 years of experience, right? And if your recruiters or your talent acquisition team is not aware of the equity issues and HR is used to saying 7 years minimum or whatever, that is what is going to lead you to paying recruiters more. This is taking the idea of wish list away, but I'm giving you a very specific example of how it can cause business problems that lead you to paying more recruiters. A lot more money. And that's one simple fix, to not get so caught up on 7 years minimum. And having, for example, many manufacturing plants only have one HR individual who is the beginning of the funnel, who decides who the hiring managers see from those other outside recruiters. And they're saying no, for example, to a bunch of great candidates. Because I said 7, why are you sending me somebody with 5? I've seen that before. That is so detrimental to your business. I cannot, I'm not saying anybody's doing anything wrong. I'm simply saying cause and effect. They have a good idea. Maybe the hiring manager said, I need 7 years or more. But if those hiring managers think that's a good idea, I'm telling you, it's not. It will lead to paying more recruiters, particularly if there are equity issues. Then you're really going to be trying to paddle a boat upstream. just starting out, how I built essentially a program to then save the company a lot of money was I had to un-indoctrinate the hiring managers on this topic. But I made different skills matrices because you can't un-indoctrinate somebody completely without giving a little bit from your end and meet somewhere close to the middle. But in general, I made what you're about to see, and you can copy this, to take away subjectivity and insert objectivity. I went around with the hiring managers as they thought, ooh, this is the best candidate you presented, man. I was like, I don't think you're right, man. Like, I don't think that's the best candidate. Because I understand what your job is, I understand your department, and I understand you think this person's the best, but here's why I don't agree. So this is me being outside of HR. From my personal experience in-house, okay, not dealing with hundreds of manufacturing clients, this is one area where, because your hiring managers typically are like really connected to the material flow and the bottom line at all times, I felt that the hiring managers were honestly, they were very open to drastically changing how they approached viewing candidates, because all they cared about was what will get me the best hire as fast as possible, as opposed to that green bubble. No, they didn't worry about that. They were open to, well, if this can get me better people faster, I will consider it. I did not have much trouble doing this next part, as much as the business systems part, for obvious reasons. However, this section right here is something that, again, given that talent acquisition in corporate America is often treated as entry level to some degree, this is not entry level right here, what I'm about to go over. If you have read HR books and all that stuff, which I've read a ton of them, most of them, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. I am not gonna lie. What the best book that I've read that was HR related and had a lot to do with staffing and recruiting was it was called HR Works by the first HR leader of Google. From the time Google had 12 employees, I think he left when it had 17,000 or 25,000. The title of the book is called HR Works. And that is about the only book out of maybe, I don't know, I've probably read a dozen of them on HR that I thought that somebody actually, I thought they knew what they were talking about, per my personal experiences. That dude knew what he was talking about. So if you've read a lot of HR books, what I'm about to say will go in contrast to it. A lot. But it's going to be hard to accept some, spiky hair dude on the internet saying the books you read suck, but those are my findings, and I'm trying to help you save money. And it's going to be hard to believe, I know, but let's just keep moving forward. Don't allow that to be an obstacle with the information I'm about to present. What I did was I broke down a way for the hiring managers and me to view candidates on the same playing field. We broke it down to from skills to flight risk or inverse flight risk, which is how likely is somebody to want to stay living here, or will they be sucked back home, for example? And then the chemistry with the intra-departmental dynamic. How is the team? Are they spread out? Are they always together? And what is the manager style? All that kind of stuff. Just 3 basic topics. And I made 3 different matrices, as you can see behind me here, because different hiring managers not only had different styles, but sometimes the style didn't matter. It was the need was different. So let's start off by a quick reading of this. This is the aggressive hire, get the best skills at all costs. I wouldn't call this a band-aid, but if you are in great need, this is the matrix that you would want to use, because you don't have time to worry about, will somebody be here in 5 years? I'm not worried about grooming somebody to take my job. I need somebody to do this work now because I have way too much work. This is the matrix you would use. So for example, you install a large piece of equipment to provide a major customer with a new product by whatever date, and your engineering equipment or processing guru just straight up leaves. Something happens, maybe he announces retirement, or he or she, and they're just gone. So you're stuck with the project halfway through without the person running the project. Okay, very, very, very urgent. So you sacrifice longevity potential, all right, or the inverse flight risk for skills. You lean heavier on skills specifically. Your goal here is to hire the most talented skills person as possible with almost complete disregard for everything else. Almost, not complete disregard, but you're putting everything else on the back burner. So look at the max scores. This is what creates objectivity. In this matrix, the most heavily weighted section is skills. So as you interview candidates, you would score them in this fashion. And your talent acquisition person can score them you could steal this. Like, this is on my LinkedIn. Go get it. Like, use it for yourself. I don't care. Just don't put your name on it if you're a content creator of some sort. And don't write a book with my stuff in it. Because your book will probably suck anyway. It's just a joke. But seriously, you can take this. And if you got this from my LinkedIn, it's actually full of a lot more cool stuff. And that's idea number 1. Specific to Un-Indoctrination, there were a few hiring managers who they were accustomed to only hiring this way. But as he or she described the job to me, they mentioned, I need somebody who can become my assistant manager within 2 to 3 years. But they're only accustomed to hiring this way, right? And so I had to use these matrices, kind of like how engineering brains work, or, especially engineering brains work this way. They like every small detail broken up in color-coded and all that stuff. And so I was able to break this down and saying, well, this is how you're wanting to hire, but you told me that you need somebody to be able to groom. So therefore, you can't hire in this way. This is not your matrix. Does that make sense? The second matrix is more of your even blend, Harry Potter. Main idea over on the right where the light bulb is. If your team adapts well, do not cause the search to drag on by seeking a super specific personality, as this creates little to no advantage. If your most talented candidate has other incoming offers, for example, then if this is the matrix you use, you would want to expedite the hiring process as opposed to scheduling more and more interviews with more and more team members within that department or other departments. If this matrix fits your specific hiring need for that one opening, feel more confident in making a swift hiring decision if both skills and inverse flight risk have strong scores, assuming that the personality friction will not develop within the department when adding this new employee. There were several departments which this was the best matrix to use because their employees within there had drastically different personalities, and or they were so spread out into the plant as individual contributors that it didn't matter. Or maybe they were in IT, and so they only had to interact on the project side of things, but most of the work was from an individual contributor standpoint. So in all of those types of cases that I just mentioned, this is a good matrix to use. This might be my favorite matrix to use, but it's not the right one for all hiring managers, or it might not be the right matrix to use for all openings, even if a hiring manager typically uses this one, as we'll see on the next slide. So look at the max scores one more time. The skills and inverse flight risk are both equally weighted. In the chemistry, or trying to judge the soft skills, is somebody a highly energetic spaz like the person you're listening to, yours truly right here, right now? So for me personally, from a chemistry standpoint, okay, that's only scored a 5, I could potentially rank pretty high here under a hiring manager who couldn't freaking stand me. Right? And so if that's the case, if you have a hiring manager like that, here, let me go to this one, you would want to use the third matrix, where chemistry is equally weighted. Does that make sense? So if I can make fun of HR and stuff, I will make fun of myself too, right? I keep things pretty even. But if you scored these 4 individuals on the other skills matrix, then you would potentially come out with a different winner. Now, this is the one that you would want to use if you are going for long-term departmental health. You need people to stay a long time. This is the type of matrix you would want to use if you needed, for example, somebody to do a cultural clean sweep. You're having problems with people taking 20-minute smoke breaks, or perhaps with that actual hiring manager, right? And you've let go of a hiring manager. You need a new hiring manager to come in and just totally change the culture. But you have to have that hiring manager under the plant manager be like this on the exact same team for a long extended period of time. Or you're going to try to hire somebody who takes over your job because you know you're going to retire in 2 years, or you have a plant manager or some type of manager or a director level person going to retire. This is the matrix you would want to use because there's some type of grooming aspect. The chemistry has to be there. Here's the general idea. If you hired 10 carbon copies of the highest score in this section to fill your department, the talent and staffing situation would be better off in 3+ years with this candidate matrix than if you hired 10 carbon copies of the highest score in the other 2 matrices. Skill scores increase as the learning curve is overcome, So that's where the three. So if you hire somebody with a little bit lower skills, but higher chemistry and better scores on inverse flight risk, meaning they're more likely to stay there, their skills within 2 to 3 years will be just as good as those initial people applying had you used the first skills matrix. Does that make sense? Because this skills portion can be learned, but inverse flight risk and chemistry cannot, and you cannot change the personality chemistries either, then in 4 years, having hired the top scorer on this matrix would result in a healthier department that is better staffed and more fully staffed because there's less turnover. And so, not from my in-house experience, but from my other recruiting experience, many hiring managers in manufacturing are mostly obsessed with the skill set only. And then they might say, but I need somebody to take over my job, like I mentioned earlier. And so presenting this objective matrix would allow that individual to see, wait, maybe I shouldn't be so stuck on skills only. If somebody is the absolute most talented person, the person I think I need, but I also need somebody to take over my job in 2 years, and I can't stand that. I can't stand that person. Many hiring managers might not make that connection very quickly. It would not come to fruition until 8 months after the person's hired when he or she leaves, which costs a lot of money and would result in using outside recruiters and paying them. This scale is also important to teams with a highly specific personality groove. For example, imagine your finance department. I don't know how big it is. But I find, and I have recruited a decent amount in finance, controllers, plant accountants who go find where money's bleeding out on the floor and then bring it, back to the accounting department. I've learned that accounting teams often are sitting really close to each other all the time. The nature of their work is very cyclical. So if you were to hire somebody with awesome skills and is local and never plans on moving, but might be like a higher energy accountant like me, who's going to create some type of turbulence in the department, well, that person might stay longer, but you might have 2 or 3 people leave that had been there for 6 to 12 years by being unaware of this, because that department has a very specific chemistry, tightly knit, because by the nature of them all sitting together, the personality style is very, very sensitive. So for grooming somebody to take over looming retirement, or for departments with that people sit in close proximity that requires the personalities to jive at all times, this is the matrix to use. And from a talent acquisition, so now to apply this, to make this actionable, this comes into play because some hiring managers are unaware to think of it this way, but also your most likely entry-level talent acquisition folks won't have any way to guide those hiring managers into making hiring decisions that are most healthy for their department, because they might be stuck on skills and be completely unaware, oh crap, if I hire that person, the chemistry, I'm going to have 2 other people leave. I've seen it happen before, and that's not from my in-house experience. That is just from my experience recruiting and manufacturing for over a decade. So in general, I had to un-indoctrinate many hiring managers on how they essentially selected the best candidate. Now let's summarize why those matrices are important. The first thing that they accomplish is they get the talent acquisition team in perfect line on the same exact page from an objective standpoint with your hiring managers, so that your talent acquisition team can better throw bullseyes to get closer to 1 interview to 1 hire. Literally, that's what you're aiming for. And without your team having a clear way to be on the exact same page as your hiring managers, the level of efficiency with which the talent acquisition operates will never be hyper efficient. Without that, essentially the railroad tracks. So if you can imagine those matrices as railroad tracks, you need to set the railroad tracks before you go. And they're essentially the railroad tracks so you can go at higher speeds. And so what this does for you is, because it creates more efficiency from being on the same page, your number of interviews that your hiring managers have to do before we make a hire, it makes the ratio so much better. More realistically, you're wanting to average about 2.8 to maybe 3.5. If you're on average interviewing 4 or more people for every opening, for every department, there's something wrong. There's something very wrong. And because you get more efficient and you have to interview fewer people, the number of days that your jobs are open on average will go down. Why? Because you're spending less time interviewing and you're spending more time qualifying people to get more efficient people even more. So it just feedback loops inside of itself. Efficiency breeds efficiency. And then because you're able to spend less time interviewing and focus on filling other jobs faster, then the number of positions open drops And remember I said efficiency breeds efficiency? So what happens when the number of job openings you have drops? Naturally, the number of people who leave over time on average will drop too. Why? One of the most common reasons people leave work is because that department is understaffed and there's too much weight on their shoulders, and then you get into that attrition death spiral. And just using a simple objective matrix to get your talent acquisition team perfectly in line with your hiring managers, it will drastically help avoid all that. I got to the point where I only had 8 openings. 8. And I was the only person handling salaried openings. I got down to 8 at one point. 8. I almost took vacation, but I didn't take any vacation. I didn't take a vacation a single time, I think. I actually worked during the shutdown and all the vacation because I had a lot to do. There's a lot of work for one person, but I was able to do it by myself, but only because of the extreme efficiency. And honestly, the thing that slowed me down the most was my blissful ignorance approaching the job with everything in that red circle and expecting everybody in the green circle to adjust to me. I did not know that walking in, and I fumbled the ball a little bit there. I could have done a better job. But regardless of doing a good job or bad job, it is a job that has to be done. That balance has to be struck. After getting on the same page of all the hiring managers, now we're starting to make offers, and now I can start tracking my numbers. I'm not going to bore you with all the KPIs, that you need to follow, but I'm going to let you know, these are the important ones, I think. You need to know where most of your hired candidates are coming from, first off. If you don't know which sources are producing the most hires, then you won't be able to tell whether LinkedIn or Indeed or Career Builder or ZipRecruiter or whatever sourcing platforms are out there when you're listening to this in 2032. Who knows what they're called by then. But regardless of it, you need to be able to know exactly where they're coming from every time. It has to be tracked. Money, money, money. You need to know where to throw your money so you don't have to throw your money at recruiters. While I was there over 20 months, only 5 people were hired who came from a recruiter, but 2 of those people were in process before I had begun my job, as opposed to the 7+ figures from the year prior. This dip down was the coronavirus. Businesses just shut down. So there were no hires. And then I had a V-shaped correction and then tied my all-time high of 14. So if you're going to want to save money, you need this tracked, not just for your talent acquisition team in total, but for each talent acquisition person. If the graphs look totally different, you're going to be able to tell, I need to troubleshoot that individual's recruiting process somewhere because something's wrong. So it's not just this graph up here for all of talent acquisition and for each individual recruiter, because sometimes you bleed money from 1 or 2 people. And if you only track it throughout the whole team, you might say, that's pretty low. We're only paying 5 recruiters every 2 months but those 5 people are coming from the same person. And you're going to be completely unaware if you don't track it. Accepted to declined offer ratio. My ratio in the end was almost 95%. It might have been 96.8, but it was close to 95. So that's a major metric. If you don't have a good acceptance ratio. So one of the troubleshooting things that you could do is, that recruiter or talent acquisition person probably doesn't understand our internal equity. That would be the first place I look. How much does that person understand about departments that he or she is serving? How much does that person understand about what we can do with our purse? Trying to make this actionable. Other items that you'd want to track are average number of days open for each job. You would want to track number of days open for everybody of all salaried positions. For all salaried positions, what is the average number of days open when you mix everybody recruiting for salaried roles together? And then that same average number of days open per recruiter. And then also the average number of days the job is open, regardless of the recruiter, but only for each hiring manager. There are 3 ways to track this. You need to track it 3 times. And here's why. Sometimes the hiring manager is the problem. Sometimes. It could be the most skilled person in your plant, but that person is horrible at interviewing or keeps changing his or her schedule where their talent acquisition team is trying their damnedest to fill the positions. But that person's travel schedule gets whipped around, this and that. And maybe it's not even the hiring manager's fault, but it's technically their fault, but maybe it's not their fault. Maybe it's the business. And so you could troubleshoot saying, hey, even though I'm hiring for Scotty, his travel schedule doesn't allow us to hire. He needs to pick his number 1 to hire for him, to have the complete autonomy to say, yes, this is the person Scotty wants. But also sometimes it is just the hiring manager. Sometimes the hiring manager just is not good at interviewing, or, maybe it doesn't have the personality style to attract people to the position. And if you don't track it for the number of days that jobs are open under each hiring manager on average, independent of which recruiter is working on it, then you're never going to be able to troubleshoot that. And thus, if that is a problem, you will be paying more recruiters because your in-house team will not come up with solutions. This is a tiny bit blurry. I know. I think you can read it though. So I had something happen that is green bubble, red bubble happen here. I got so efficient with understanding each department to a very in-depth degree that for 3 months in a row, for all departments, hiring managers interviewed significantly fewer than 2 people on average. And in the month that you see the black arrow here where my small cursor is going in circles, it was in June of 2020. Among the 14 accepted offers and people who started, 7 of them, the hiring manager only saw 1 person. 1 resume, 1 interview, done. And I call those one and dones. But red letters up here, major KPI accomplishment. I will take the time to read that to you because this is another area where it was the green bubble versus the red bubble, but not from HR. This created problems from the hiring manager team thinking I'm doing something wrong, although they simply were not accustomed to hyper razor sharp efficiency. But it created confusion and frustration unnecessarily, but still it did create it. It is obviously a good problem to have, right? If you're on the business executive side trying to learn how to not pay recruiters watching me over here, be like, hey, this sounds awesome. I got to give me that problem. Well, yeah, it was a good problem to have, but it's still a problem. So I want to go over it here. But as the average number of people interviewed per hire goes down, the number of accepted offers will go up, while simultaneously the raw number of resumes hiring managers see in front of their face will go down. Hiring managers seeing fewer resumes. In our engineering department, there was a moment where the managers saw so few resumes that they inquired, where are the resumes? We want to see them. Or they voiced, instead of inquiring, they came to, I was a pretty popular guy there. They all knew where I sat. They were not shy and they let me know to see all of the resumes and essentially control the flow of resumes and who is screened. And so what I had to do here, I knew those 2 or 3 hiring managers who had this concern for good reason, because I think I did not recruit for them at first. And then once the company saw what I was able to do there, I started recruiting for more and more departments, right? And so those new departments, I was a foreign object for them, right? But where are my damn resumes, right? That's what they were going through. And so the way I overcame that was I figured out, well, who does that person know? And then I would try to have them have a conversation like, hey, you can, as long as he understands the job, you can trust him. Essentially, it was what I did there. But it did create a problem. And there were a few email exchanges above me about the concern of them not being able to see the resumes. So that was the problem. Now, here is what makes it actionable for you. And this goes back to that second slide with the green bubble, red bubble. It's not the HR green bubble this time. This is the only hiring manager green bubble that will be difficult to burst, but it needs to be burst. It needs to be burst at some point, especially if you have a specific talent acquisition person handling that specific department for an extended period of time. Your talent acquisition person needs to get to the point where the hiring manager does not see any flow of resumes until it is somebody that is probably going to be interviewed. It is a full-on presentation. Does the person fit in the equity? Why is he or she looking? What is the inverse flight risk? Here's how this person's skills align with what you told me during the job discovery process. And then here's the resume. That is how it should, that's what the hiring managers should see. The hiring managers should not, over time, in the end, be saying, out of these 80 resumes, I want you to call this one, this one, this one, and this one, and this one, this one. No. At first, that might be necessary in order to allow your talent acquisition person who might be new to serving that department to get an understanding of, what is that person's style? What is that hiring manager looking for in a resume? That process can be healthy at first only. But if that remains a perpetual business process and hiring practice, you're going to keep paying recruiters. As simple as it is. I know that might feel uncomfortable. That's the only green bubble that the hiring managers have, I think, in this presentation. And it's probably going to exist at all plants, at least for 1 or 2 hiring managers, that they're totally accustomed to controlling the flow of resumes and deciding who is screened. But you can't do that. That's not sustainable long term. Unless that hiring manager has the ample time, that might be okay. But why would your hiring manager have extra time to be looking at resumes? Your hiring managers are way too expensive to be doing that. Like, they need to be spending their time doing what they're good at, and they are not in talent acquisition, are they? No. So they don't need to be filtering resumes. That's not what you're paying them for, but you are, in addition to what you're paying them. There's money bleeding somewhere because their time is taken away from what they should be putting their eyes on. No matter how you cut the cake, it's not a sustainable business process, I'm telling you. But it's going to be highly uncomfortable, especially if you're a hiring manager looking at me like, oh, this idiot, I don't like what he's saying. I know that it might be uncomfortable. However, if your company wants to pay less recruiters, that is one bubble that you have to burst. But wouldn't it be nice, like, think about it. Wouldn't it be nice if you could trust your talent acquisition team so much that you don't even need to look at all the resumes? How much time would you save? You just know that, hey, once he or she in talent acquisition sends me 3 presented candidates, I know that there's an 75% chance I will make a hire from those 3, even if it takes 4 weeks to fill a job, to get the 3rd resume or presentation, not just a resume, a presentation with resume, fully qualified candidate. I'm comfortable not knowing how many resumes are out there because I can trust that individual. So that is a business process that will, not only is it going to have to come together, but it will have some ebbs and flows, and it will take a while to finally balance. Almost like a pendulum, it takes a while to calm down because you're dealing with multiple people, and when people's differences and opinions come together, like, it creates that little effect where you get a little bit of breathing room before you hit homeostasis. Although this is a good problem to have, I think I looped around to tell you how this general idea should be actionable. You want to shoot for your hiring managers to not control or even see the flow of resumes at all in the least, because they fully trust the talent acquisition team. But before you can get the trust, you have to be on the same page. And even if you're on the same page, but your talent acquisition team doesn't understand the equity limitations, you're never going to get to that point. So all of this builds onto each other for razor sharp efficiency. Going over some of the main ideas here. Results-based is the best results possible to be the most competitive in the entire space of hiring. You are the best hiring manufacturing company in your city. To get there, you have to be as close to one-click apply as possible. But now go up to the green box, the green letters, audit ease. You can't have audit ease with a bunch of one-click applies. So how are you going to balance that? Now, I actually do kind of have a solution for that. It's a middle ground. And for this first one, a lot of the ATS systems or ERPs, whatever, HRS systems, many of them, after they're connected to these job boards like ZipRecruiter and Indeed and ZipRecruiter can be designed to connect to your business system to automatically answer the required portions without creating a login, without creating a password on your website, but it still answers those questions in form of the questions that can be asked on ZipRecruiter. You can knock out the equal opportunity stuff. You can knock out the ability to work on site as opposed to hybrid remote. You can knock out a few of those things with the questions. So even though it says one-click apply, and it still says it, but sometimes the recruiters within the job board itself, within ZipRecruiter or Indeed, they can add the extra questions. Now, I went out recently and looked at how companies are using those platforms. I saw some of them that overused that. It says one-click apply, and then it says 1 of 30 questions. That's just as bad as creating a login and a password on your website to go apply to your careers page. You don't want 30 questions. It said one-click apply. Boom. You lied to me. I'm not applying to your job, even though I might be the best fit. I'm not applying after that experience, right? I thought that from my experience, looking at that, some of the middle ground, the easiest ones were if you can connect the applicant's answers to your system to automatically connect the required fields. You might need to lower the amount of required fields down to 5 or 7 at most, because if you think you're tricky by doing the one-click apply, but then asking the 30 questions to then connect to your HRS system, those websites tell you how many questions you're getting ready to be asked. People will click away. So don't do more than like 3 to 7. I would go for 5 most, but I saw several with 7, and If a lot of them are 7, then people who are applying will be used to that being the average amount of work or time invested into applying. Because people are trying to apply to a lot of places. Those people are not going to spend time logging in, making a login and all that stuff, or trying to remember their password they made on your website 3 years ago, and then doing the password reset. They're not going to do it. You're losing so much talent. One-click apply versus oddities. That's one struggle you're going to face. Money on the job description versus not hurting people's feelings who are currently employed because they see how much the position pays and maybe the pay range goes higher than what they pay. I've had people worry about this before. But what are you going to do? If you want to fill the job, I need the amount of money on there. You don't want to spend your time and the candidate's time interviewing to then realize you're $15,000 off, which is typically not a great idea anyway. Getting candidates trying to take a cut in pay. That's an inverse flight risk, big red flag. Big red flag. Unless there's an amazing reason. Sometimes there are. Sometimes people do want to take a step back, but now I'm getting off topic. So you don't want to invite candidates in who don't know that they fit in the equity. They need to know, and so does your talent acquisition team. And if you have the business culture where the money right on the ads is not visible, therefore you're bringing in candidates who are not totally aware I fit into the equity, and your talent acquisition team knows this person walking into my plant, we can hire him or her if we like him or her, and your hiring managers know my time invested in this interview is not going to be blocked at the end because we're $10,000 off and we're all just clueless about it right now. This removes all of that. And it'll have you pay recruiters a lot less. The other one we went over was the hiring managers seeing fewer resumes and versus the hiring managers get the resume flow. So a lot of this takes major adjustment, and change often creates friction. But what kind of friction do you want? Do you want friction in form of paying recruiters absurd amounts of money? Or do you want people to get used to getting as close to possible as this red bubble at the cost of bursting their own green bubble, which is friction? But you have to choose which friction do you want more. Because I think money being sent out in the mail is a lot more painful than the friction of people trying to figure out how to make a few changes. But that doesn't make it easy. And again, from my personal experience, I came in a little bit too bullheaded here, and I thought everybody around me should change, right? Even though it would have been the picture perfect way to hire people as fast as possible. Sometimes the business systems or people's prolonged exposure to a specific process, which is similar to a business system, right? Because if your person has been there a long time, they are a part of your system, even if it's all in their head. So that's a business system. And it takes a long time to adjust to that business system, or adjust the business system to the most razor sharp results oriented processes possible. And sometimes you can never get this far because one-click applies are simply not feasible for your size of business because you don't want to be audited by the government and get caught with your pants down. Don't think that you have reached recruiting nirvana yet just because we're close to the end of the video. The list of items of simply low-hanging fruit without even being beyond entry level, that list goes a lot deeper. I'm going to give you a very general example without spoon-feeding it to you because I need to leave a few things up my sleeves for those manufacturers who reach out to me and ask me for my services. Links in the description section and in the pinned comment. One general example of absolutely low-hanging fruit that can be put into effect immediately, as in within 4 hours of work, all of your job ads out there across both job boards and your company careers page, this can be actionable within 4 hours, likely with only one person doing it. However, I'm not going to give you all of the answers. The idea is in regard to the algorithm. For example, when you search something on Google for hairstylers near me or how to potty train a stubborn puppy, Google retrieves your inquiry, and although I'm not an IT person at all, there is some form of comparison to its database of related words, and how it spits out the order of results is the special part of the algorithm. That's specifically what I'm talking about, is the order with which results are given to you so that it's by far the most convenient, and usually on Google searches and no other search engine yet, almost guaranteed, on page 1 of results, the best possible resource for you is there. And because Google is by far the most dominant search engine, the way it brings up results, even Indeed jobs, ZipRecruiter jobs, or jobs near me, whatever the case, it uses the same algorithm. The LinkedIn algorithm is a little different. However, for manufacturing, which is the bread and butter of this video, it's less useful, so it's not nearly as important to study that interesting algorithm. And so when candidates are out there searching for a job, the database from which Google makes that comparison to then spit out the best results, aka potentially your job, the only way you could ever have a chance to getting really good results from general inquiries on Google. In general, Indeed and ZipRecruiter piggyback those Google algorithms. So within ZipRecruiter itself, if they search, or Indeed also, if a candidate searches within Indeed or within ZipRecruiter, the results will use nearly the same exact algorithm as if somebody did that same exact search on Google, which honestly, there are probably more people searching through Google manufacturing engineering jobs near me than on those websites. And if I had to guess, Google probably gets more of those job inquiries than the two largest job boards combined, specific to the inquiry sent within a job board, as opposed to from the general Google search bar. And so the hint I'm going to give you, without too many spoilers here, is that there are a few key elements in being among the first results. I'm not going to give you all the secrets because I spent a lot of time studying the algorithm and essentially comparing my own job ads in the same city for the same job. I had to pay money, essentially, or the company's money with a little bit of permission, to compare the results so that I could, for example, go into incognito mode or use a VPN so that Google interprets my next search as a totally different user from a different place. I would then compare, if I search such and such jobs near me, what does Google spit back at me as the top result? If not the top result, do any of those three A, B, and C samples, do they show up in the top 5? And what I found is, I strongly suggest that your talent acquisition team, or at least one person within, makes a decent relationship with your account representative, either at Indeed or ZipRecruiter, and then try to fish out how long has that person been there. If you are lucky enough to be able to talk to somebody who's been there a year and a half, if that is the case, which it's usually not, I would suggest building a working relationship with that person to try to get their ideas on how you can make your job ads kick your competition's butt out there on the interwebs. That's one hint. Where I have seen those account reps go wrong, per my extensive and vigorous analysis of the algorithm related to job searching, is they always suggest shorter titles. It's not true. It's simply not true. The order in the title, the first word typically gets the biggest bang for the buck, but it's the first 3 words that get the most bang. However, the rest of the title, although it can look awkwardly long, even if it's the 6th and 7th word within that title, if you go that route, they tend to have a better fishing net for candidates searching that specific word than any word or keyword within the job description itself. So for example, let's say logistics manager. Some companies of different sizes might simply call that supply chain manager. And some companies might call that warehouse manager. So although supply chain manager might encompass more job responsibilities, some smaller companies, perhaps yearly business revenue of $200 million or less, they might use those titles interchangeably. Whereas a company of 1 billion plus has very distinct job titles, and those are totally different jobs. For example, the logistics might be the outbound portion of the supply chain, your products leaving to its customer destination, and one of the other titles might be the inbound person because the job duties are separated because the business is simply too large for one person to do both jobs. And if you can find a way to get creative and maybe fit 2 of those 3 keywords within the title, even though your business title is specifically warehouse manager, it's a wise choice wielding the title and its power as the best possible fishing net to include some of those other words, because people from different business sizes and schools of thought on how titles are separated or not, those people might be your best candidates and wouldn't think twice. Because they've been supply chain manager their whole lives, they would never think to search for a logistics manager. Or a logistics manager would never search supply chain manager, for example. Similar to how, most likely, your team, or perhaps even anybody in HR, has never had that thought before. It's extremely low-hanging fruit, and it's all based on the algorithm. That's only a baby step on how to make your job ads just totally kick your competition's butt. And I wanted to leave you with the thought, even though I need to wrap this video up after an hour and some odd minutes, there's a lot more to it. So don't hesitate to reach out. My contact information's below. And most importantly, I sincerely do hope that you and or somebody within your company or on your team can utilize some of this completely free information and try to implement it by yourselves to reduce your recruiter cost even before giving me a second thought of reaching out to me. I wanted to give you a ridiculous amount of value for free and essentially let karma do the rest. And because the currency used within corporate America, not to pay recruiters, but the currency within coworkers amongst themselves is oftentimes recognition of some sort, there might be a little bit of mingling on who's recognized for trying to do what within rolling out a new plan within your talent acquisition, and the end result might end up being a fumbled ball. Even though I've laid out a game plan for totally free in this video on what will drive your team to producing the best results and the hiccups and the obstacles that a team would face when trying to implement it, it's still going to be excessively difficult. Let's say that you think to yourself, I want to reach out to this guy immediately. I would perhaps suggest trying to get your team to watch this video, attempt to implement it yourself, and depending on how well or not well it goes, then perhaps reach out. Or if you're on a tight budget and paying for third-party services like me would be something that you simply can't do, I'll be developing a Discord community where somebody or multiple people from your team, hopefully closer to the bottom line and the production floor, could join to have direct access to me a few times a month during planned group events. And pop on with camera on, microphone on, and ask me questions directly, and we can share screens and bounce ideas off of each other, and perhaps even pull up ZipRecruiter, and Indeed along the way to give real live examples, sharing screen while we're literally talking with each other. At the time of the upload of this video, that link will not be down there. If that Discord link is not down there by the time you're looking, just check back in a month. To reiterate one more time, feel free to let me know in the comment section if anything was unclear. I will probably check comments once or twice a month, and I can respond to even an inquiry, hey, this part wasn't clear at 23 minutes and 28 seconds. Like, what did you mean? And I could clarify what I was attempting to convey in that moment. And again, it's free. Like, the comment section doesn't cost money, especially if you're trying to do this stuff for free. I would be more than willing to reply to your comment. And for more serious business inquiries, my business email is down below. I hope you found this helpful. Happy hunting.